Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, August 22nd, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about a bit of election news out of the battleground state of Michigan, as the Michigan Democratic Party and the Democratic Party chair has now announced that they are penalizing Democrats who endorse Mike Duggan, the independent candidate for governor in the state of Michigan, who's running against the Republicans and the Democrats in the 2026 midterm elections. The Democratic Party now revoking access for these Democrats who endorse the independent candidate away from having access to voting records, and voter rolls and things along those lines where, voting records, not who people voted for, but, how often people vote and just generally speaking, all the necessary components to run a full-fledged campaign either statewide or locally. What the Michigan Democratic Party is doing is something that I think we haven't seen for a long time out of a national Democratic Party or a statewide Democratic Party, which is they are going toe-to-toe with the Democrats in the state to say that either you fall in line or we will rescind your access to the necessary campaign tools that you need to run for re-election. Now, the endorsements that Mike Duggan just picked up were from some candidates across the state, but no one who would necessarily rely on some of these, resources that the Michigan Democratic Party has. A lot of this is seen by many members of the Michigan Democratic Party as a warning sign for would-be state senators or state representatives or mayors, for that instance, who come out and support Mike Duggan ahead of the 2026 midterms. Now, Mike Duggan's entrance into the race as the incumbent Detroit mayor, he was a Democrat. He campaigned for Kamala Harris. He's a big name in the city. 90% of residents in polling recognize his name, super high name ID, and one of the most necessary and prominent cities in the state for Democrats in order to win. And now he's switched political parties, left the Democratic Party, is running as an independent, and Democrats are fearful that he might split the vote given that his base is almost entirely the Democratic Party. Now, Mike Duggan is popular, and he does pull away some Republican support, and the preliminary polls do suggest that the data is a bit wonky. Mike Duggan comes in third place, doesn't seem to have too much of a viable chance of victory, but certainly comes into this as what many people could see as a spoiler in the 2026 midterms. Now, the first poll was released, one of the first major polls that was released early on in this race back in May. This was a race we covered early on. We talked about Mike Duggan entering into the race, but Jocelyn Benson and John James, the expected respective party nominees, Jocelyn Benson, who right now is the Michigan Secretary of State, who's leading in the Democratic primary, John James, a U.S. representative from Michigan, who's also leading in the Republican primary. Both of them are, quote-unquote, emerging as early favorites or frontrunners, which to me is interesting, because nowhere in a two-way race would you ever see data like this presented as early favorites, where the Republicans and the Democrats are obviously the early favorites, because that's what you expect in a close and competitive race. But in a multi-way race, it is noteworthy, because what it is telling us is that Mike Duggan doesn't really seem to have an immediate pathway to becoming elected governor. Now, Democrats have seen that some of their mainstream members of their political party have come out in this election and actually endorsed Mike Duggan. You're going to find that there are, former U.S. reps who have come out and support Mike Duggan. You have found that some Democrats on the University of Michigan Board of Regents, Michigan State Board of Education, another Board of Regents member, these people in particular are Democrats, have endorsed Mike Duggan, and those are the, three that were referenced by the Michigan Democratic Party, even so far as the Michigan Democratic Party chair saying, I'm looking forward to their independent bids for this position in the future, meaning that he will not allow them to run as a Democrat in the future, which means that if they're not there as a Democrat, chances are they might not win. But again, this is meant to be a warning sign. Right now, only one incumbent state representative has endorsed Mike Duggan, and that is, Karen Whitsett, who now is going to be revoked of access of Democratic Party support for her re-election in future elections, and that's pretty substantial. The Democrats are saying essentially, because the stakes are so high and because the circumstances of this race are so important, that if you do not endorse our eventual party nominee and you endorse an independent, or God forbid for the Democrats, endorse the Republican John James, that they will not provide you the necessary components for you to run in the future, essentially ending your political career. And again, this is the type of energy that I think many Democrats have not seen from their own political party. This is not a commentary on whether or not you should agree with the decision. It is merely a commentary on that Democrats are really willing to go to fight fire with fire. Endorse our opponent, we rescind you from the party. It's clear cut. And in a state that Donald Trump won in the last presidential election, Democrats can leave nothing to chance. Gretchen Whitmer benefited from the fact that she was a tremendous candidate running against a lackluster Republican who was propped up into the frontrunner status after 5 Republicans were expelled from the race for forging signatures. Allegations around forging signatures is what the Board of Elections in Michigan said. You are disqualified. The frontrunner, James Craig, who ran in that race, who was the former police chief for the Detroit City Police Department, former Democrat turned Republican, ran in 2022, was disqualified in the primary for, again, forging signatures, these allegations that came forth. Tudor Dixon got propped up. So, of course, this race, combined with the fact that Gretchen Whitmer was a very strong candidate and abortion was on the ballot in Michigan, an 11-point margin is expected and made sense. Given all of the context here, in 2026, Democrats cannot rely on that. They cannot rely on a 11-point victory in a state, especially when they have the popular mayor of Detroit, former Democrat who campaigned for Vice President Harris, who is a mainstream name in Detroit politics, for the region of the state that without it, Democrats would nearly collapse. Take a look just, at what we're seeing here in terms of actual vote share in Detroit, in Wayne County. Kamala Harris got 63% of the vote. She received, compared to Donald Trump, 300,000 more, or 200,000, no, nearly 250,000 more votes. 250,000 more votes than Donald Trump did across the state. And so when I see that, what that would have done if you remove it out of the equation, you would have found, and again, that doesn't even discuss the surrounding areas, the suburbs around Detroit, the metropolitan area that it sprawls outward towards Ann Arbor and towards, upper Michigan, you would find that Donald Trump would have won this state not just by 1.5 points, but he would have won by 3 to 4 points. A much more substantive and massive victory, and would put Democrats in a position where they would feel significantly less at an advantage. And so given that Donald Trump already won Michigan in the last presidential election, again, Democrats looking to 2026 say, even if it is Jocelyn Benson, or Garland Gilchrist, or whoever it might be, whoever this nominee is, they need to win. Because if they do not, it will be a Republican that wins. This is not a two-way race between Jocelyn Benson or whoever else versus versus Mike Duggan, right? This is not a Democrat versus independent race. Michigan is not that type of state. They just voted for Donald Trump on the presidential level. And you have to think, if the vote splits, Republicans don't have their former Republican popular mayor switching political parties and running, right? That's not what's happening here. That's not what is, going to benefit the Democratic Party, because Democrats are facing up against one of their own. And there haven't been really many polls that have come out of the state in quite some time. We are, lacking a lot of data in the general election. That's arguably because a lot of people are looking to see how this shakes up. Does Mike Duggan get brought over to the Democratic ticket as lieutenant governor? Is he gunning for a position in a potential administration? Does he stay in the race? These are all things that are up in the air right now. But it looks as if, 1, yes, he is staying in the race. And it looks like, 2, he's not gunning for second place. He's gunning for governor. And so the question remains, is there a viable pathway for Mike Duggan that comes with a fractured Democratic Party? Well, that answer, I would say, probably. If Mike Duggan wants a conceivable pathway to becoming governor, it would rely on the collapsing of the Michigan Democratic Party and full-throated endorsements from countless elected officials on the Democratic side. You would have to reel in some massive, massive names, and then it would be sort of like a Dan Osborne, Deb Fischer situation where Democrats don't run a candidate. But obviously, that's not the case. Michigan is not Nebraska, and Democrats are not in a dire position. They still lead in the polls. It is Mike Duggan who comes up short in every single way you crack it, but it doesn't look like he cares. At least, not to the degree that he's going to drop out. He may drop out of the race, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen. But the urgency around it is exactly why the Michigan Democratic Party is saying, and a warning to any other candidate who says, I want to be a maverick and endorse this independent candidate, and even, state reps and state senators that represent areas in Detroit that know and appreciate and like Mike Duggan's governance and leadership style and, political history. But they are also met with this very real reality that Democrats, in their eyes in 26, the Michigan Democratic Party leaves nothing to spare. That they will not allow the risking of losing the governorship because someone wants to be a maverick. That's exactly the message that they're sending You go with him, you leave the party. You lose our support, you don't run in our primary process, we will bar you from running as a member of our party. And the Michigan Democratic Party, for all intents and purposes, can do exactly that. They can prop up your opponent. They can rescind your ability to use their resources to get out the vote. Think about how many of these Democrats rely on the Michigan Democratic Party's, voting groups and voting databases to say canvass, to cut turf, to get organizers out there and actually getting people on the ground to knock doors and make phone calls. These are things that are housed under the umbrella Michigan Democratic Party. And it has never really been a conversation about Democrats endorsing other candidates because that doesn't happen in battleground states. It very, very, very rarely happens. And yet in the Michigan governor's race, we are finding that it might happen more frequently than Democrats would have hoped for. And so what that would result in is likely a Republican victory in the Michigan governor's race. Now, that's not a guarantee, and that, again, of course, is just up in the air. But I do not believe, adamantly, that Mike Duggan will take more from the GOP than he does from the Democrats. And even if the data right now suggests that Benson wins, it is by the narrowest of margins. In no reality should she be up by just 1 point. In no circumstance. The data in the state, just taking a look at these hypotheticals, we don't have any head-to-head races here, but I'd argue that Jocelyn Benson or Garland Gilchrist wins this governor's race if 2026 ends up being as blue of a year as we expect it to be. But even with that blue year, I could still see a reality in which John James is elected governor because of this spoiler vote, because of a candidate who comes in from the left, a former and popular incumbent Democratic, mayor of one of the largest cities that Democrats rely on just across the country for vote share in swing states. And without it, Democrats don't win. And without it, Republicans are able to win the governorship despite the national circumstances of the 2026 midterms. So, as we see Democrats navigate this very tumultuous time within the Michigan Democratic Party, their Democratic Party chair's message is clear. Either you endorse our candidate, as is expected of a Democratic elected official, or you are no longer a Democrat. You are no longer in this position where you can use our resources. You may be able to do it on your own. And if you have the funding and means, by all means, go ahead and do it. But when it comes down to what we are seeing in the state of Michigan, this party's chair's message is the stakes are far too high for you to go out there and want to be a maverick. Mike Duggan, that's the argument they're making. If he was so popular and such a great mayor, he should run as a Democrat in the Democratic primary. But he clearly knows that he won't make it through against the lieutenant governor, against the Michigan Secretary of State, and that is the big problem here for the Democrats, because Mike Duggan says, I know I won't win a primary, but I want to run independent, and we don't know what's going to happen there, which is why the Michigan Democratic Party is not leaving anything to chance. They're not allowing this to take hold of them and spoil their chances of winning. They are sending a clear warning sign to anyone else who is considering endorsing Mike Duggan in the general election or even in the lead up to this primary process, even if they say they'll revisit their endorsement after Democrats choose their nominee, yada, yada, yada. People like to say and cop out at things left and right. But again, to me, this message is very clear and feels like it's coming out of a place of a new fire in the Democratic Party that is literally saying we are going to go to any end to win an election because the stakes are far too high. And that's the energy that I think a lot of Democrats have looked to and said that they appreciate. And whether or not this is something that you agree with on the basis of conventional and traditional American politics, we are not in that stage. We are not in that reality. And I think that the Michigan Democratic Party chair, in regards to this, has met that moment for a political party and a political base that has an appetite for so much more, that has an appetite for this national pushback Democrats are doing against the Texas map, that has an appetite for decisions like this where when the Democrats go out and say democracy is on the line and that everything is on the line, that Rick Snyder, the former Republican governor, was responsible for X, Y, and Z, and it can never happen again. The base wants the party to act like it. And that's exactly what this Michigan Democratic Party chair is doing. He's acting like it. He is meeting that moment for them. And again, whether you agree with it or not, they are the facts of the case, and it very much looks like it's going to be a very compelling and strong deterrent of any other mainstream Democrats from endorsing Mike Duggan for governor, and might end up being the reason why he is axed out of the race entirely and drops out, potentially endorses Jocelyn Benson or Garland Gilchrist, whoever it might be, as the Democratic nominee. But Democrats, their priority is to get him out of the race because he does not provide to them a viable pathway to the governorship that is as clear-cut as it was 4 years ago in a less beneficial national environment. But we will see. A lot of waiting, a lot of interest. The Michigan governor's race is top of mind right now, and we'll see how Mike Duggan and other Democrats navigate a very interesting campaign season. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. And on the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.